You're listening to the NCF&B podcast, part of the OG Podcast Network. The NCF&B podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFBpod. This episode sponsored in part by Food Scene. That's foodseen.com, providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. And now, enjoy the show.
Listening to the NCF&B podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And in studio with us today, we have a man of many talents, of musician fame, of visual art fame, and now more than anything, of farming fame. Here is David McConnell of Infinity 100 Farms.
Hey!
What's up, Dave?
What's up? Nice introduction, thanks.
Yeah, well
deserved.
The list could go on and on because you kind of are. I mean, the term gets thrown around so liberally now, but you're kind of a Renaissance man and also a multifaceted artist, as Matt mentioned. I mean, all mediums that I could think of have been at least approached, be it audio, visual, tactile, culinary. I mean, what else? What else could you do that you haven't done yet?
In the art medium.
I don't know what's next.
Like
knitting.
Pornography.
I want to get into knitting.
Knitting.
Oh,
yeah. Pornography, already done that.
Right. You made some trips out to the valley, did you, while you were in Southern California?
I grew up in Southern California. Come on, San Bernardino County.
No,
right?
you know...
of course, porn. Yeah, check.
Porn capital. That'll be on our other podcast, that is illicit lyrics.
And explicit at night.
Yeah.
Let's get that listenership up.
Seriously, we need some brass tacks. You know, I had the thought, and Max, I texted you about this last night, and you're probably like, what the heck is Matt talking about? But like... I had a thought that you are Jim Morrison if Jim Morrison had a child that he cared about and, like, you know, lived for.
Oh, that is so poetic.
Like,
how did you come up with that?
Well, because, like, you know, Jim Morrison famously went to UCLA film school and was actually probably, like, thought of to be an accomplished filmmaker if he focused at that. He wrote poetry, he did all types of art forms, and then obviously was a musician, but he never had a child, or that he knew of, to like really maybe focus his efforts, let's say. So he was always out there, but you have all these talents and very visually gifted.
Well, maybe the timeline's right. Maybe David McConnell is Jim Morrison's son. He just doesn't know it.
Maybe.
Maybe so.
and I'm jumping ahead in the story, but it seems like, you know, your son being born really helped you to focus and like hone in on some of those specific skills.
Well, I think the word focus is key there because honestly, you know, because I've done so many things, I wouldn't say that like I set out to do all these different things. It was more like I couldn't focus on one thing, probably is what it comes down to. And so when you bring up the Jim Morrison thing, it's kind of funny that you said like he couldn't focus on film school. He just, you know,
right.
But yeah,
I mean, I guess eventually he did focus on making music, right?
Yeah.
But he found like a passion of his, and so for frame of reference, I mean, we alluded to the things that you do, but so that our listeners understand in a more specific sense who you are. Of course, you are farming at urban farms and farms to come in the Raleigh area. Mm-hmm. I, of course, have known you when I started working at Standard Foods because you were maintaining the farm that was the Standard Foods farm. Right. Has since kind of changed, and we'll get into that. We'll talk about what you're doing specific to there. But prior to all that, you born in Springfield, Missouri? Is that correct?
I was born in Springfield. I don't remember it because it was like the first year of my life. But yeah.
Yeah, but you are a Southern California guy by most nature. You and I both have spent a lot of time there, but didn't know each other in that area. You spent a lot of time like in Malibu and
well, yeah. I mean, as an adult, I was on the west side in Hollywood, West Hollywood, and Malibu. But growing up, I was in out in San Bernardino County in Pomona, Chino area. Oh, yeah. So that's where I grew up, and I'm proud of that because it's a cool place to grow up.
A real
it was
place.
rough, but it was awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of culture out there.
Learned a lot. Yeah, yeah.
But during the time, you kind of took to music at an early age and started performing in a lot of bands, just sound projects in general. And that eventually got you into recording engineering and such. And so the cool thing is, many people on our show, you can't just like Google their name and then a Wikipedia page just pops up like, hey, that's who it is. That's kind of like, you've made it. But but on your Wikipedia page, one of the first things that it connects to, and I want to start with music just because I selfishly am a huge fan of music and what you do. Let's start there and we'll make our way into it. So
sure.
Notably, you were formerly known for your involvement as a collaborator, producer, and engineer for Elliott Smith's final album, From a Basement on the Hill. And you had essentially worked with Elliot for about 3 solid years of just kind of putting together all of his musical thoughts down in some sort of, whether it be digital or on film or on tape, things like that. Yeah. So,
Max, just to give some subtext, some people might not know who Elliot Smith is, so maybe.
And geez, I usually don't like to talk this much. So, like, the first time I ever knew who Elliot Smith was his major acclaim from the Good Will Hunting soundtrack. Like, he did Miss Misery and Say Yes. Is that what's called? He had a bunch of hits off of that particular album. I think he and Gus Van Sant knew each other in Portland or so, and had a previous friendship. So when the director of the film was making it, he thought, well, this is a good connection. This is a great musician, kind of folky, poppy, independent, whatever you want to call him. But he had a great sound, and it really went perfectly with the movie and was nominated for an Oscar. Performed live at the Oscars that year. And of course it was all that acclaim because Matt Damon and Ben Affleck won for best screenplay. So then right after that catapulted his career into at least the major zeitgeist of music in the United States. And then from that point on became a fixture in the Los Angeles independent music scene, performing at Largo and the Mint and like cool places all around. He was a pretty common musician in the area. I was performing and playing shows a lot at that very moment, so I was very aware of Elliot Smith and what he was doing, and he just had like a scene, I guess, or he was a part of a good scene of musicians. And so you were with him kind of towards the end, and of course, and unfortunately, he passed away. It's still, some of those stories are kind of blurred, and I don't know if you have any insight on that, but talking about meeting Elliot and then kind of recording and some of that process, because I'd love to know how you came to be with that.
Yeah, so it's funny you'd mentioned Largo and the Mint. So I used to play at those 2 clubs in particular with my band. At the time, we were called Golden Boy. And, I was playing with this guy named John Bryan, who was producing Elliot Smith at the time.
Yeah.
And
John Bryan's very well-known producer, musician. Yeah.
Yeah, we would open for John a lot and, sometimes just hang out before or after the shows or whatever. And, he had been working with Elliot at the time on this album that you're mentioning, and Elliot had just finished his Figure 8 tour, and he had been playing all over the world, large venues, sold out, 3,000, 4,000 seat venues, and so his career was pretty awesome at that point, and he had music in a lot of soundtracks and stuff like that, and DreamWorks was his label, and they sort of thought of him as their Golden Boy. He was like their guy,
their meal ticket,
and they were really pumped about this next album. But Elliot was struggling with some demons and having some issues with some chemical issues, if you will, and just struggling as a human, as many creative people do, and just trying to figure out what the hell he was doing on this planet, is the way I think of it. And really just having a hard time. And he and John sort of butt heads in some ways and parted ways. And so Elliot was looking for another producer, a new producer to work with. And he was like, I don't want to to work with like the regular, so-and-so or so-and-so. He's like, I want to go do some research and find somebody new. And so he was asking around, and through our sort of peer group, the people that we knew in common, he got my name and my phone number, and got in touch and said, hey, I've been working with John Bryan. It didn't work out. I need a new producer. Are you interested? This is going to be like my album of albums. I want to do this epic record, like totally different than anything I've done in the past, but also getting back to some of my roots. And
well, wasn't it just even that point? I believe his deal at that time was to release a double album, right? Like it was supposed to be like a major recording for the, like you said, for the studio.
For DreamWorks.
So.
Yeah. He had carte blanche basically to do what he wanted. And so he decided, he was really into the Beatles and he loved the White Album, and he's like, I want to do my version of the White Album, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was more than that, but he was into so many other, just great albums. He loved the Beatles catalog after like 65. As did I, so we clicked on that from a production standpoint. Mm-hmm. But he was also listening to a lot of like Hendrix. He loved the psychedelic sound of the Hendrix albums at the time. He loved the bass playing and the drums especially, more than the guitar playing, which is cool. I was like, he's listening to Hendrix for the band more than
Noel Redding, man. That guy could fucking rip on the bass.
Yeah, and he was just like, listening to records in that sense, like, the way that I was listening to records, which was like, let's pick apart all the elements and figure out what's really awesome about these recordings. And he was also listening to Red-Headed Stranger at the time, and he was listening to that record because of the bass. He's like, let's just check out this bass, and the bass was amazing on that album. And so Willie Nelson is awesome, and it took me hanging out with Elliot to really appreciate Willie Nelson like on the level that I do now. But anyway, he was also listening to like Stooges and all kinds of stuff.
I'm just gonna put a little a sidebar. Somehow I feel like Willie Nelson has helped influence your farming in some way. Well, that would make sense.
That would be great, but no.
I mean, I don't know if he's officially a pot farmer, if that's what you're getting at, Matt.
Just like I could see somebody, in the fields humming Willie Nelson songs or something like that.
That would make for a great story, but no.
So let's.
I do want to work with Willie Nelson in a musical sense someday, though.
Okay,
right?
That's a dream of mine.
But okay, so let's go through. And it's been documented before about his recording process, Elliott Smith's recording process for this album was long, right? I mean, he was not going to just go in over a weekend like the Black Crowes did for their second album and be like, we recorded this in a week. That's how they did that. But that was the exact opposite of this process. I mean, he was like really doing the research, and is it fair to say that you were his confidant or his, I don't know, consigliere during this whole time? I mean, how close were you?
I mean, I guess my title was co-producer because he and I were collaborating on the production. But we also became close friends, and he moved in with me, and we lived together for a lot of that time. We were basically like kind of like, I don't want to say best friends, but we were like friends / brothers, in a way, because we were always around each other and like at times got on each other's nerves and stuff. But
sure,
so we were kind of like more like brothers in a sense.
Were you the dirty one, or was he? Who was the messier one?
As far as messy, I'd say he was. But he was a delight. I mean, he was just an amazing, human being with a huge heart, and he struggled a lot, but he had a great love and passion for the world and for people, and he was always looking out for the little guy. If somebody was picking on somebody, he would stand up for them. Almost any occasion, he would give a $20 bill or a $100 bill even to a homeless person if they asked for money. Oh, wow. He was so generous with his money and his time.
He didn't come across as a guy that seemed very materialistic. Like, just seemed like, I mean, maybe with like guitars and amps or something, but
not even that. I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, he wasn't materialistic, and he was also an extremely intelligent person. You know, he was, you know, in school he was just like an incredible student. So he knew a lot about the world and sociology and science, and you know, he was an academic as well. So he had a lot of insight into humanity. And I think that helped make him, you know, such a great human. But you know, unfortunately, he wasn't enjoying his time on the planet at that time when I met him. And you know, all he cared about was getting that album finished. And it's not like he set out to make it a 3-year process, but it did turn out that way. And you know, really, it was because we were both recording an album that had never been done before. Like the way that we were approaching it was totally new. Like we didn't have a template for how to make that album, and so we were doing things.
What was something? Give me something that you were like, oh man, this was different.
Just like, so there's so many things, but you know, from a technical standpoint, like the way that album was engineered, the types of, you know, the techniques we were using, like the way we used microphones was totally crazy. And now I do it all the time because it worked and it sounded amazing. Mm-hmm. But like, you know, it was against the rules back then. You know, like you don't put a microphone there. Yeah. You know, but also the way that we treated the instruments, the way we detuned the guitars, the way that we tuned the drums was totally unheard of. The way that we tracked was crazy. Like we were using an old Stevens tape machine, and John Stevens, the guy who invented that tape machine, was also a good friend of mine. And he's now passed away. But John would come over like in the middle of the night to come work on the tape machine and, you know, tune it up or whatever, if you will. And so he'd come and hang out with Elliot and I. And
when in like tuning the drums, were you doing them like really, really loose, or like were you tuning them high, or like what made it different?
All kinds of stuff. So like we would like take the snare, for example, and be like, all right, let's you know, make the bottom head just so loose that it's almost going to fall off, and then let's mess with the top head, and let's just get a snare sound that you've never heard before in your life.
Yeah.
And then we would like triple track it so that it would be every time we hit the snare, it was on 3 different tracks. You know?
Hopefully, it didn't sound like Lars Ulrich's snare on Saint Anger. That still goes down as documented as the worst sounding snare I think I've ever heard in music history.
It's funny, like, you know, we would do it differently for each song, and so each song has its own style. And you know, sometimes we would be trying to get that snare sound that's like a hollow, more open sound, and then sometimes we'd want that tight 70s, just like super deep and low end, crisp snare sound, you know, Fleetwood Mac sound, you know. And so we were always changing, you know, every instrument on every song, but we were also using all these, you know, old vintage instruments. I got a Chamberlin from Tom Waits. He had 2 different Chamberlins that were both that were prototypes that were made in the late 40s. And, you know, these were like the original
Chamberlains
synthesizers, basically.
Yeah, okay.
But they had tapes in the machine, and so every time you pressed a key, a tape would play a sample. So essentially, these are the first sampler playback devices that are invented.
And these weren't digital buttons. It was playing an actual audio
tape over a tape head, with a, you know, there was a wheel inside that was constantly spinning at, you know, a certain speed per second. And that's how the tape, you know, would roll over the head. Yeah. And so it was like 9-second samples. So you could have violins, you could have human voices. But this particular Chamberlin, Tom Waits has the other one. I have the sister machine. And actually some of our tapes have been intermingled. This machine, you know, was the original Chamberlin before they mass manufactured them, because it was a prototype. So it had all these weird sounds in there that like the other machines didn't have, that the Beatles didn't even have access to when they bought their Chamberlin. You know, and so we were like using that, and we bought this piano, and we tore it apart and like changed the way the piano sounded, and we like started adding, you know, like just weird devices and like clamping them to the strings, and detuning the piano.
And breaking all the rules of like traditional recording.
We were just hoping to have something click, we wanted to explore. Yeah.
So let's push forward a little bit, because I know that like some people's eyes might glaze over a little bit. I could talk geeky stuff with music recording all day long, but I went to school for this stuff, and I know not everybody's like, oh yeah, let's talk more about Chamberlains, except for those two guys driving. They're like, oh wait, keep going. Aside from those two dudes and me, let's get to the point where, unfortunately, Elliott Smith, he passed. Mm-hmm. And even that is an unusual scenario. I believe it was, I don't know, like there was an argument with his girlfriend or something, and people don't know like exactly how, but I think as the story goes, they considered it to be a self-inflicted wound, and he passed.
Right. So
what comes up very big in my mind when I hear the story and I read about it is that you spent a lot of time with him, but when the album needed to be finished
posthumously.
I can't speak. You didn't finish this album. As the story goes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I read it was that Rob Schnapp, who was his producer back when he did the original Beck album, Odelay and Loser, all those songs, and then he had recorded some of Elliott Smith's albums, like his first few albums. But I guess the family had Rob finish this 3-long trek, and so I don't know what was going on there, but you didn't contribute to the final process. You did
to the mixing. No.
But you were the one that was there next to Elliott the whole time doing this album. So could you shed any light on that, and how did you feel about the final product?
Well, honestly, I think Rob did a great job. He's another just really talented person, like Elliott, and he did, I think, 2 or 3 of Elliott's records, and he'd worked with Beck and stuff like that at that point. But yeah, the family, after Elliott passed, his family, took over his estate essentially, and so his music obviously is his estate at that point, and that's how he made his career, made his money. Yeah. And so they basically decided, okay, we're going to take over this project, and we're going to have people that we know, finish this. And I think that they probably made a really wise choice working with Rob. They also brought in Joanna, Elliott's ex-girlfriend, who's also a producer and a really cool person, and they did a great job mixing. I was bummed at first because they were missing some of the tracks, basically, and so
because you were in the moment when a recording session from when you hit record to when you hit stop, you were in that moment. And you kind of saw Elliott's face, whether he was satisfied or dissatisfied with a certain session. So you probably knew, okay, that piece needs to go on that track or something.
Yeah, well,
to that effect.
or like they would end up using the scratch vocal on accident, like on a couple of the songs, or something like that. Yeah. And it's like, oh gosh, I wish I could have just sat in and given them some notes. But yeah, and then also like, whole instruments were like missing from certain songs and stuff that they didn't have because they didn't have like the reels that were slaved to the original master and stuff, so because we had several machines going in sync, because there were so many tracks and overdubs.
So do you think the final result would have been wildly different had Elliott stayed, had he lived, and mixed it himself?
Wildly, no. I don't think wildly different, but I think, because Elliott, put his thumbprint on that thing, regardless, that was his, his genetics all over that thing. So that's, wildly different. No, I think it would have been more nuanced, but again, I think that Joanna and Rob just did a fantastic job with what they were given.
Nice. Well, let's move beyond that. I very much appreciate you talking about that chapter in your life, which is a chapter that a lot of people also share close to themselves as well, people that are huge fans of Elliott Smith, and I think they kind of wanted to know a little bit about that story. So,
sure, yeah.
But let's.
And there's been a lot of weird stuff that's been printed over the years that's like totally inaccurate. So yeah, I don't mind talking about stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you were there, so
Clear the record.
Yeah, I mean, we're a North Carolina food and beverage podcast. We go off the rails a little bit, but I think that this was good content, so forgive us.
And today in studio, we are speaking with Dr. Jennifer McMillan right here in Raleigh at Meredith College.
Thank you for having me. So I'm the director of the graduate program in nutrition at Meredith College.
Yeah, so Dr. McMillan, why are we speaking with you today?
Well, we're speaking today to chat a little bit about our program. It's all female at the undergraduate level, but our grad programs are co-ed.
Okay.
And so we have gentlemen in our graduate program as well. And we have historically been a program that focused on dietetics. So that is the pathway where you would go and work as a clinician in a hospital or maybe a long-term care facility. But we also have a curriculum now that focuses on the other aspects of nutrition and food science. Things like sustainability to food and culture. We're expanding that portion of the department and program and focal area. Really, one of the reasons is there is an incredible food scene, as you guys know, here in the Triangle. And this is a place where the ideas around sustainability and food insecurity are bubbling up around our culture, and we're hoping to help professionals move into that direction as well, as opposed to only thinking about food and nutrition.
This is almost a way of being proactive from looking at food and nutrition from the whole sense from the farm, as opposed to just looking at the end result when somebody is ill and needs to change their habit.
Yeah, it's true. We focus on nutrition education, so making sure that people in the community know what they're supposed to eat, how they can do it in a fun way, how they can incorporate healthy habits and ideas into their families, into their communities. We focus a lot on food insecurity, so what can we do to help people who don't have access to food readily.
For more information about Meredith College and the master's program, you can reach them on their website at meredith.edu or click the link on our website at ncfbpodcast.com. From what happened with Elliot Smith, it's been documented before that even you yourself might have gone through a little bit of depression, and I imagine that this must have been a very emotional time in your life, so much so that as I've read it, you moved on and you effectively kind of got out of Dodge, out of Los Angeles, and found yourself in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
What was the impetus of going to that specific city? Was there something that drew you there?
Yeah, so I had been touring with Golden Boy for a couple of years all over the U.S., well in the world. And I was just kind of like keeping notes on my favorite places. And, I found a lot of small towns on the road when we were touring that were just amazing, like little charming places. And Asheville happened to be one of them. And our tour manager, Meredith, she grew up in Asheville. So she was like my Asheville connection. And I was tempted to go to Portland, Oregon, because I love Portland and I knew a lot of folks up there. But I was like, nah, I'm just going to get on a plane to Asheville instead. And I knew I had to get out of LA. I was, yes, definitely, dealing with some depression over Elliot, having some issues with my personal relationship with my partner of 11 years. And so it was time to move on. And, also I was spending like 3 hours a day in the car because it's LA. And that was just, one day I just slapped myself in the face and said, what am I doing? Like, I don't like being in a car. Why am I in a car for 3 hours a day?
I hear you, homie.
So anyway, I got on a plane to Asheville with a backpack, and that was it. I left everything behind, all my stuff, including my recording studio.
Yeah.
And just said goodbye to all of it. And I felt an incredible sense of freedom and relief, getting rid of all that stuff.
Yeah.
And just having this backpack. Already, like, the cloud of depression started going away. Just getting rid of stuff. And so that was sort of, my rebirth, if you will. And when I went to Asheville, I started, I found a place to live, a really cool place to live, and downtown. And then I found a recording studio there, and I started doing session work there in Asheville. And that was sort of how I got my foothold in North Carolina. And Asheville was like a lot different than it is today. It was still super duper like artsy in a way that's like, not very clean artsy,
Hippies is what you're trying to say.
Funky artsy.
They're just a bunch of stinky hippies.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about well, there was definitely a few of those. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely just this totally artistic, free for all vibe that was going on downtown in Asheville at the time. However, I don't know if it was just like this crisis I was going through of identity or what, but like one day I walked into a art supply store there in Asheville and just pulled out my wallet and bought like a canvas and a bunch of paint. And I don't know why, but I did. And I took that canvas home.
Had you ever painted before?
When I was a kid, my mom was a painter, and she taught me a few things when I was like 10. But that had been the last time, and I'd never thought about art after that, really, visual art. Actually, I've got a story about that to go back to possibly in a minute. That's kind of funny, but yeah, I took that canvas home and I laid it out on the floor of my living room. I didn't have like an easel or anything. The canvas was just a bare canvas. It wasn't stretched or anything, and I just started making this picture. It was just this giant canvas, like taller than me, and I got into it. Like I became obsessed with making it, and then when I finished it, well, I don't know about finish. Like
you never finished.
You never
your work
really
like
finish,
that, right?
yeah. But
when you were done,
when I decided to stop ruining it, I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm going to do another one. And so I just started making visual art.
Was there, with that particular first piece, was there like a subject matter that you were going for, or some story that you were trying to tell in that first piece that you either knew intentionally or found out about it at the end?
I would like to think there was, but I don't really think I had much of a narrative other than my own personal situation. The way that I was feeling inside was sort of coming out visually, I think. But cognitively, there wasn't much of a story, or I wasn't like trying to make like some sort of like political statement or anything like that. So in a way, it was kind of like a nod sort of to maybe abstract expressionism in a way. However, I had this figurative element to the work. I didn't want to like just do like a style, if you will. So there was all, I had this very mixed media, mixed sort of vibe going on in the work. That still to this day I really enjoy trying to chip away at, and it's sort of like this mystery to me when I'm making the work, because I can't really say like definitively what it is,
but
or what it means per se.
It seems to me that that's when art becomes therapy, because it's your it's the physical manifestation of your subconscious.
I like that. Yeah,
because like that's like what therapy is. You can't really work out sometimes what you're thinking about subconsciously, and then it kind of like strings it all together.
Well, if you go with Freudian theory, yeah, definitely.
No, this was Matt did a wine design last weekend and did an awesome sunset with a Shiraz.
Oh yeah,
never with a Shiraz.
But so your artwork definitely has so many different elements that you put into it. It's not just acrylic or oil.
But yeah, my first public exhibition was at the Nasher Museum of Art back in 2010.
Yeah.
And that one was a very mixed format because I was working with sound as well. I was bringing my studio past into my visual art, and I started doing sound sculpture, and that was my first museum show was a sound sculpture piece, and then that traveled to the ICA Boston, and then to the Miami Museum of Art, and then to Seattle. after that.
Did it make an appearance at Duke as well? Or was
yes, at the Nasher Museum. Yeah.
Sorry, that's what you said. And yeah, so I'm showing right now, we'll have to put it up later, but this is your piece, The Walrus Wasn't Paul, as it was entitled, nice. Which I like a lot specifically. This one, out of looking at a lot of your pieces, this one kind of jumped out at me. And I got to know, so looking at this piece, there are multiple different audio sine waves, or whatever you're going to call them. Like, I'm looking at them right now on my Pro Tools rig as we're recording it, but you have them colored in different pieces. Are these particular pieces of actual audio significant?
Are they significant? They are to me.
I mean, I know they're real audio pieces.
Yeah,
but like, what is this audio?
That's the Beatles right there.
It is.
Yeah. Well, that's why it was the Walrus is Paul. It's coming from
the White Album.
From the White Album, yeah. And you can see like the Capitol, logo, Capitol Records.
Right.
That all that's been painted by hand. But basically, I was also turning those sound waves into a forest, essentially.
Yeah.
And so you can see like they're appearing like trees. The depth of field on the sound waves, being vertical like that, and chopping up that song into several pieces, several clips there, so that they actually. The one on the left is the beginning of the song. See how it starts off quietly at the top?
Yeah.
So that's the beginning of the song, and then you can see, if you go all the way to the right, the very last tree you can see the fade out.
Fade out.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man.
So scientifically, those are very accurate sound waves. Like if you could pop those back into Pro Tools, that's the song you would hear. The way it, I mean, that was months and months of painting, on a very large piece of Italian linen, so that I could have that smooth surface to get the accurate.
This is a way of sampling music that you could never really get sued for, right?
Well, that's how I described it. Was this that phase in my work was I referred to it as sampling.
Yeah.
Is that the same? That's the same exhibit where you did La America as well?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. So that particular painting was done around the same time as La America. However, and again, that's going to the Doors. There's a Doors connection for you. Jim Morrison connection.
Yeah, because
I'm also 2 degrees of separation from Jim Morrison. I'll have to tell you that story later.
Well, you might as well tell it now.
Well, I can. But yeah, those 2 pieces were completed at the same time. That one...
Yeah, you have a hypodermic needle that's being fed and almost quasi-looking like a carrot top.
Carrot top coming out. And the carrot leaves are sound waves.
Yeah, the carrot leaves are, in fact, they look like the same sound waves of the Walrus was Paul, or wasn't Paul.
But that's Eric Satie that I sampled in that painting.
That music is Eric Satie. Awesome. Yes. And so it's like going into a man that's also doubling as a target range.
Yeah. With a book/album with the advisory coming out of his chest.
Right.
The parental advisory.
The parental advisory is actually on top of the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Yeah. And so talk about... Yeah,
was that a statement on what was going on in America at that time? And with
over at that time, yes, but also over many hundreds of, many years.
Drugs, Bible, rock and roll.
One of your soundscapes of that, you read the first page of the Holy Bible in reverse,
right,
to start off the whole piece.
That was a different piece, a different exhibition, yeah.
Right, but you have definitely intermingled religion and pop culture,
yes,
and food and all that kind of into your art all at one time.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of the social sciences. I study anthropology and sociology, and so in a way, these are narratives that are very related to sociological events. The Bible piece in particular, that not the sound one that you just mentioned, but the painting there with the advisory on it. That's sort of like a personal statement, because my parents were so religious when I was a kid, like to the point where we didn't have a television because they thought it was the devil.
What were you?
Stuff like that.
What were you raised?
They were really conservative.
What type of religion were you raised?
They were Baptist. My mom still is Christian. My dad is not. He has since, denounced religion, if you will. But at a very young age, I decided that religion was not for me.
Yeah.
I put my foot down, basically, told my parents that, hey, this is a crock, in my opinion. I'm not buying it. I don't believe all the stuff that goes along with this book here that you're trying to make me,
I said when I was 15, I gave up Catholicism for Lent, and then I never went back.
Oh, that's funny.
So
the parental advisory on the Bible is basically I was terrorized by religion as a child.
because it's almost like you're force fed it.
Well, yeah, and also I thought I was going to go to hell, and there was this devil guy who was trying to kill me. And,
it's terrifying.
It was the way that Christianity was being presented to me as a child was totally inappropriate for a child, period, or anybody.
Agree. Yeah,
but not to say that religion is bad, because I think religion is actually a really positive thing for many, many people. It's just the way that it was presented to me was terrifying,
right?
And it messed me up. And so that's very related to my personal experience, that particular painting.
So just to bring your painting work back to somehow the food and beverage aspect, you also have a painting called The Sommelier.
Yes.
And so does that have anything to do with the sommelier, or did you have an experience? I mean, obviously you like wine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was really into wines when I lived in California.
Right.
I even grew up around vineyards and worked with some winemakers and stuff, in my young adulthood. And, just learned enough about it to really get hooked on the concept of making wine. And yes, I did meet some somms. When I lived in Malibu, I was heavy into the culinary scene, if you will. Met a lot of the famous chefs in the Southern California scene.
Yeah.
And, dined at a lot of really amazing places, and just sort of got into the diner side of food, I didn't know
enjoyment of experiencing good food.
Yeah, I became a foodie essentially. Yeah, and because at that time I had the resources to go out to eat, know, but that piece is a portrait that I did, an abstract portrait of Chet Baker, and who I love. I'm a huge fan of Chet Baker, not just his playing, but also his voice. He's an incredible. If you haven't heard him sing, his voice is unbelievable. Yeah, just amazing. Just warm and sultry, and just
I'll have to fade it in right now. Fade it out.
So I was inspired to do a Chet Baker piece, and instead of just calling it Chet Baker, I envisioned him as this just this refined, almost sommelier, if you will, like a master somm, but in the music sense.
Kind of like he's providing you with a big silky red with soft tannins.
Yeah, but like how he somehow went through this journey of gaining this just master knowledge and presence.
I did all the work so that you could enjoy my experiences in this glass or on this song or in this painting.
Right.
Nice.
We partnered up with Triangle Wine Company because these guys are awesome. They offer weekly wine tasting events, a wide range of wine and beers from around the world, and an easy online store to find the wines that you'd like. They also offer pickup, local delivery, and shipping. We even set up a promo code NCFB so you can receive 10% off all future purchases.
Go to trianglewineco.com or one of their 3 locations, and for $99, pick up the NCFNB 6-pack, which includes 3 white wines, 3 red wines, and we threw an official NCFNB hat in the bag.
So once again, buy your wine online or in-store at the Triangle Wine Company and use our promo code NCFB during checkout to receive 10% off your future wine and beer purchases. Go to trianglewineco.com or click the top of our website at ncfbpodcast.com.
So in 2010, you released your first art exhibit. You also released Fox to the world.
That's right.
And Fox, not Amy Fox, previous guest on the show. Fox is your son.
Yes.
And he was born in 2010.
Yes.
Seems like a pivotal time in your life, because obviously becoming a father, but then also experimenting with art in a visual medium and doing all this. There is a correlation I want to at least maybe bridge the gap with, at least. Fox, he has asthma. He has a couple of allergies that make traditional, eating at like a fast food joint almost impossible, I would say, right?
Literally impossible.
Impossible, yeah. You have to be aware of his diet and his surroundings for his own health and well-being. But at the same time, that those that position that Fox is in has also led to you understanding the science of food. And is it fair for me to make that bridge that's what also kind of pushed your hand into the knowledge of food and the science of growing food? Absolutely.
Yes. Fox was definitely the catalyst for me getting into this whole thing. When you say allergies, it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, allergies, sneezing, etc.
Yeah,
gluten intolerance, blah blah blah. But yeah, his is fatal. So, if he ingests or even gets it on his skin, any form of dairy, he could be dead within 15 minutes. And so that's why we take this thing so seriously. However, he also has a complicated respiratory, condition that is like it's a complex form of asthma where sometimes we've had to go to the emergency room because he's not breathing, and we're in the hospital for 4 days trying to, and scaring the crap out of the hospital staff,
Yeah.
And it was and still is a difficult thing to live with, and so. I tried to do as much research as I could into how these things happen. There's not a whole lot of data out there. Eventually I started reading medical journals that were like in German and other things that gave me some insight into.
You speak German?
No, I had to translate
it.
Yeah.
Into German. Okay.
And so I would sort of do this research, and they were talking about. These things that sounded kind of esoteric but interesting, like things about children who are raised in the countryside on farms, correlate with less, respiratory illness. Asthma is very infrequent for these children. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this research was in its beginning stages, and so there wasn't a lot out there, and so I just started reading everything I could. I started getting every sort of book I could on food, on herbs, and healing. The body with food and herbs, much the way that traditional Chinese medicine approaches this sort of thing. I didn't feel that our version of medicine here in the United States was doing us much good. Mm-hmm. I felt frustrated. I was getting, these really large medical bills, but not any results.
Yeah.
And so, it just sort of it forced me to change my life in the way that I thought. And while reading all these books, I was learning how to grow food as well. And I was learning how to use herbs medicinally, which types of herbs helped which types of symptoms, and generally just tried to keep my son as healthy as possible. And I've cooked every single one of his meals from scratch since the day he was born. And I spend 3 hours a day preparing food.
Yeah,
at least sometimes 5. I can't buy I can't buy him snacks from. The typical kid snacks, because a lot of them were made in a facility that had dairy in it, things like that, and it's been tough, but I like you said, I can't take him into a restaurant to eat. I can't.
We set it up at Standard a couple times where if he was going to come in, it was like when it was closed. I want to say we brought him in so he could eat, and Chef Eric Montagny made sure everything he made.
We haven't done that yet, but we are going to do that, and it's so gracious of Chef Eric and everybody to offer to do that.
Yeah.
And so we are going to do that for Fox soon, as a special occasion where I'll probably be in the kitchen too at Standard.
Yeah.
And I'm just monitoring and chopping up vegetables and stuff.
Yeah.
Making sure we don't get any cross-contamination because it's that serious.
Yeah. Well, but like we were hanging out, speaking back to the fair game day trip when we went to that's basically like you're out at a relatively like to like a farm or a ranch, if you will. It's kind of out in country. And we're running around having a great time. But yeah, you almost didn't have to worry about him out there because it's like he's in nature.
He's in nature.
That's where he should be. But I mean, he's such a ball of life and cracked me up. I mean, we found a frog and he's running around holding the frog and scared my girls with the frog. And just, and then after that, of course, my two daughters, one, Alexander being the same age as Fox. When are we going to see Fox again? Where's Fox? Where's Fox? So he made an impression, to say the least.
That's awesome. Yeah, he is a delightful human being. He is so full of joy and energy. And, thank God he's so resilient because he handles this better than I ever could, for sure.
So having kids and knowing this, and Matt soon with Cam being close to being 2, he'll be really starting to ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions I love that kids always want to know the answer to is, Dad, what's the biggest number?
Yes.
It's like a constant question. Every parent listening in the car right now is going, oh yeah, my kid asks that question all the time. To which the answer is, it's infinity,
Right.
So then the next thing the child always says is like, well, what about infinity plus 1?
Exactly.
Or whatever. And so I'm alluding and I'm walking you to it, but explain the name of your farm.
The name of the farm is Infinity 100 Farms. And that's because Fox was always saying, the biggest number in the world is Infinity 100, Dad. You should know that.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, are you sure? And he's like, oh yeah. Trust me. It's infinity plus 100. That's the biggest number.
Yeah.
Yeah, because infinity's not the biggest, Dad. Sorry.
He knows.
Yeah.
It is hilarious because kids cannot wrap their minds around. It is a hard thing to understand, something that is infinite, that has no end. So it's always like, yeah, I get that. Plus 100.
Right.
That's the end.
Yeah.
So Infinity 100 is a large urban farm.
It is. So Infinity 100 is basically 3 separate properties at this time, as of like 2 weeks ago.
In Raleigh?
Inside the Beltline, in downtown Raleigh, yes. And basically, it's my land where I've lived for the last 9 years, where Fox was born, and that's 1 acre of many different types of mostly herbs, herbaceous crops, and mushrooms, and then as of just a couple weeks ago, the Standard Foods farm has now become Infinity 100 Farms number 2/3, and that's about 1 acre, and that's
you just blew the minds. I mean, Infinity 100 plus 3. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
So that's about 1 acre, and that's vegetable production mainly. I'm going to do a little bit of a mushroom program there as well, but I have a lot of perennial crops as well going on there, berries and such.
But the style of how you grow food is, I don't know if I want to say it's in an old world sensibility, or at least it is definitely not in a corporate farm sense where you're taking 40 acres and just growing potatoes.
Correct.
You are doing significant variation of vegetables from even micro with inside of its own genus. So like tomatoes, multiple different tomatoes, multiple different beans, multiple different potatoes, all on one small area. I think in effect you said you have eight acres, or at least the potential will be 8 acres total, but to have about 28 farms. I'm sorry, I read all this wrong.
Well, dude, everybody knows that's just called permaculture.
There you go.
Permaculture is the definition of what sustaining life through agriculture. Is that
so? Well, so permaculture is a big part of what I do, but it's not all of it. Permaculture has taught me a lot. I'm doing sort of a mixture of many types of agriculture, including several types that I feel like I've sort of just come up with out of experimentation. It's a polyculture, that is like polyculture times 20, because I'm growing like over 300 species of plants at any given time in the same land.
Yeah. And so I think that's, Max, kind of what you're alluding to. What is the thinking behind growing so many different species?
In one word, diversity. Mm-hmm. So what I've found through farming over, the last 8-9 years is that the more diversity you have, the healthier your farm is.
Okay.
So I don't have to use any pesticides, not even organic ones. I don't have to use any type of herbicides. I don't have to use tractors or any expensive equipment, because it's just not necessary, because the plants sort of work it out amongst themselves, because there's so many different species. However, I would say that a lot of what I've done comes from like ancient sort of techniques. Also, I've studied a lot of anthropology, like I mentioned earlier, and have learned about how humans have cultivated many crops over, say the last 6,000 years. And so there's a lot to be learned from history as well. Permaculture was sort of developed in the 1970s, and it's a wonderful thing. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's awesome. And it teaches us a lot about not just growing food sustainably, but living sustainably as well. Just, our day-to-day life practices and business practices and whatnot. So this third farm, you were talking about the 8 acres. So I've mentioned the 2. And then the third farm is super exciting, because this is going to be one of the largest urban farms in the country. And we're breaking ground on that in the next couple weeks.
Roughly where is this located?
It's about a mile up the road north from Standard Foods. And it's next to the Greenway. And it's 28 acres total.
Wow.
Our initial production area is 8 acres. But we're also bringing in the rest of the property in phases, like over a 6-year period.
Yeah, you have it broken into different stages, starting with vegetable. Will you go through the 3 phases and talk about what Infinity 100 Farms will be on that property and in its 3 phases?
Basically, yeah. So it's going to be a farm that has 3 basic operations. And so food growing, food production, that's the main purpose. Year 3, we're going to start adding an educational component. That's where we're going to be giving permaculture courses, offering permaculture design certificate courses, teaching biointensive farming. Basically, anybody who wants to learn about this stuff, we're going to have different types of workshops or courses or classes to meet just about anything people are interested in, whether it's soil building or learning how to capture and store energy. But teaching these sustainability systems to the community is really is phase 2, and while we're still selling vegetables and produce, to the local restaurant industry, especially, that's what's going to be like 60% of our business is restaurants and markets. We're going to be working with like these international markets like H Mart and supplying them with a local source for ethnic produce, essentially. Yeah. So that they're not having to buy it from, wherever, from Honduras or whatever. Amazing. So that's a niche that we're looking to fill as well.
Just want to update our post-apocalyptic people draft board. I think you're moving right to the number 1 spot.
Dude, woodworking. You might be the LaDainian Tomlinson of the post-apocalyptic world.
You are the number 1 draft pick.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right on.
So, do you have any good hand-to-hand combat skills?
Not at all.
All right. Well, it might be a second rounder.
In anthropology, you've probably researched some very effective weapons.
Yes, actually, we've had to study that quite a bit. Yeah.
Why urban farms? Is that just because of logistics, that it's close to where you live, or do you have a feeling that somehow, or is that better because now society is moving more towards urban, so it's good to have farming and it's better for sustainability? I'm answering your question.
So urban farms are key, and the reason that is because it's in front of more people. It's in the community. People are seeing it happen every day.
Right.
Children are driving by with their parents, and all of a sudden they're talking about farms. So from that simple point of view, it's good to have it around because it serves as an example. People see where their food is being grown. And yes, it's closer to where it's going to end up. So it's closer to that table, to that restaurant,
Right. With the basic thinking, the closer we are to our food, essentially, the better.
Yeah, I don't want to
food sources.
I don't even want to drive 20 miles to deliver food because I just put all that carbon into the air.
Right.
So for me, I try and think about it as like, hey, I want to be able to deliver food on my bicycle. If I can do that, then I'm doing something right. And so for me, urban farms means education for the community, but it also is it's helping the environment.
It's an example also for the community.
It is, yeah. And also, honestly, it's just cool to have people around. Yeah, it's amazing how interested in farming people are, and they just show up and just talk.
Well, in this day and age, for sure.
Yeah.
So.
And selfishly, he's almost creating an environment to where Fox could probably be a little bit more, like he could roam a little easier. If there are a bunch of urban farms everywhere, then Fox has more square footage to roam around.
Right. Yeah, and he's been foraging with me since he was 1. So he's like he loves just going through the woods and. Look, Dad, there's sorrel. Look, Dad, there's, miner's lettuce, lamb's quarters. Look, Dad, like he can point out like over 100 species of plants that are edible.
Awesome.
And so he loves it.
He's also doing that in Chinese too, right?
Yes, yeah.
Because he goes to a Chinese school magnet, right?
Yeah. So he's learning Chinese, and actually he's quite impressively good at it. He also knows Spanish.
Yeah, it's an interesting day to hang out with the McConnells and see what's going on.
I bet. Well, tell us a little bit about some of the things you figured out with herbal remedies in trying to help Fox. Like one of the things, I guess, mullein for respiratory issues.
Yes.
And what are some of the other things that people, not only for food sources, but herbal remedies can use?
Mullein, that one alone should be talked about for a second.
What is mullein?
So it's a plant that kind of, it looks kind of like lamb's ear. It's got like that soft, velvety, large leaves, and then it produces a flower out of the center that is stunningly beautiful.
Okay. Can you grow that in a garden, or is it like okay?
Yeah, I'm growing it. Yep. So people who have asthma or children with asthma should know about this plant, and the reason being is that it is so effective. At least for me, in my experience with Fox, it works better than any drug that any doctor has ever given us, including albuterol and all that stuff that you pay a fortune for, essentially. Sure. And that stuff is necessary in an emergency, right? But for most of his episodes of asthma, if I make a tea with mullein leaves, his asthma is gone within 5 to 10 minutes. Like his wheezing is gone. Wow. Now, if you don't want to grow it, you can go to like H Mart or one of those,
get a plant
markets, and they sell it dried. The Hispanic community has been using it in cooking for a long time, but also on the back of the bag in Spanish it says for asthma.
So it's not a secret.
And it's just mind blowing to me that the medical community has not jumped on this, or even developed a concentrated drug form of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's
it's a lot less expensive than albuterol. So
and EpiPens.
When I had my wisdom teeth pulled, the doctor was like, medicine, gave me something like Percocet, to which I had an allergic reaction. I don't have allergies towards anything, and that's like the one thing that I had an allergic reaction. So I couldn't take them. And he goes, here, just take this instead. And he gave me clove oil. And he's like, just drop those on your open cuts, and it'll instantly, you'll feel good. And oh my God.
Why don't you just do that to begin with, Doc?
Exactly, because Doc doesn't make any money on it, right?
Yeah, the Percocet. Well, and it's funny because at the
pharmaceutical
time,
companies don't make anything.
Yeah, I was at 23 getting my wisdom teeth out, and he gave me all this Percocet, and I thought, this will be good with a cocktail. Right. And then I got an allergic reaction. Then all my buddies were like, don't worry, he'll just give you Vicodin instead. So I'm thinking, cool, I'll get some Vicodin. And then I get goddamn clove oil instead. I'm like, I can't get high off of this stuff. But then it actually worked.
Exactly.
And I kept that little vial for any time I had, like you get like you cut your mouth or any like sore you might get, not those sores, but just anything you got, like, whatever, you floss too hard and you like whatever bleed a little. So I would put a little clove oil up there and oh my God, instantaneous satisfaction, like all the pain went away.
Yeah.
And I asked him when he gave it to me, I said, this sounds like some Native American type of thing. He goes, well, yeah, that's what it is. It's like for any toothache that you would have back in in the fields, you just take a clove plant and you just chew on the leaves and the pain would go away. It's like natural sedative.
Yep.
Why are we not discussing this holistic sense of medicine?
Exactly.
So, Shaman McConnell, tell us what else there is that we've learned clove oil or clove leaves, mullein?
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Mullein. Yeah.
Mullein. So what else?
There's different ways to say it. So, I mean, gosh, there's so much knowledge there. I wouldn't know where to begin. There's
comfrey for sprains?
Comfrey is great for sprains, yeah. My neighbor had a bad accident where he broke his leg, and I gave him comfrey for his wounds, and it helped him out tremendously.
What, is that also a plant or a tea or what?
Yes, it's a plant, and it's actually a really awesome plant for the soil. So it has all these medicinal benefits, but it also improves soil dramatically. And
how would a human ingest it, though?
Yeah.
So what you do with that? So it's really great for like sprains, even some broken bones. And what you do is you can make a compress. Is what I usually do, where I'll just chop up the leaves, mix it maybe with some oil, and just put it into a bandage and just wrap that. Around the area. Yeah. I mean, you can ingest it too. It does have its own qualities. It's more about external though.
Wow.
I'm gonna try it on my knee.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Then how would you know if it's raining?
Yeah, well, that's not the problem. But anyway,
another one that's kind of fun is lemon balm. So lemon balm, I think of it as like nature's Xanax because it is anti-anxiety.
Really?
Yeah, and I just throw it in a salad and it just mellows you out.
Where do you get lemon balm?
From my garden.
Okay,
but that's not from a lemon tree. This is a different.
It's a plant. It's a plant. Yeah, it's an herb.
Can you get all those like you said at H Mart? I mean, if you don't grow them or if you want them right away. Or
I don't know about lemon balm.
You just come to Infinity 100.
Exactly. Yeah, and eventually those stores are going to have that stuff. Standard Foods already has my herbs, available to the public.
All I can say is, Sarah, look out for some lemon balm in your upcoming salads.
Chill her out.
Well, yeah, and obviously, if people request it, we can harvest stuff specifically for someone. If they come into the grocery and they're like, hey, do you have any blah, blah, blah? If I've got it back there, I'll harvest it on the spot and bring it in.
Yeah.
Or somebody from grocery will, if I'm not there.
So you've studied anthropology pretty extensively. Obviously it's trial and error, but like, how does somebody just begin to understand that? Like, oh yeah, this is for respiratory. This is like, back when they figured this stuff out.
Well, I mean, this knowledge was there thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. It's just been lost. And so, language dies out like, every few hours around the world, a language dies. There's a fantastic article came out 6-7 years ago in National Geographic about vanishing voices and how, communities are losing sort of their heritage and their culture because, it's being dominated by technology and, people are losing, the past. And so when a language dies, like the last living person speaking a particular language dies, we've just lost all the information that has been passed on to them from their ancestors.
Yeah.
So this stuff has been there for thousands of years, but we don't have all of that knowledge. So a lot of it is like re-experimenting and finding out what these herbs do. And they need to do a lot more research. And, it's amazing what plants contain. And each plant has a different element to it that no other plant might have. It might have something in there that cures cancer. We don't know.
Right. It only just begs the question, and it kind of sounds obvious that the whole world, and I don't know if I sound like too hippy-dippy with this, but I mean, the whole world, there's usually a hunter, there's a gatherer, there's a predator, there's a prey, there's like an answer for everything. So yeah, so why wouldn't there be a natural cure for almost anything out there? Otherwise, then we would just be eradicated through one small disease, But
yes,
but it feels like there is a way to make things happen. But unfortunately, economically, we probably look at things like big pharma and, hey, take this pill and make you feel better and all that, and then then we cease to explore the possibilities of what our Earth can give us.
Yeah, because big pharma has now transitioned mostly into synthetics. They still do a lot of phytomedicine as well with plants that are being manipulated into drug format.
Sure.
But what you were saying just reminds me that of traditional Chinese medicine and how that's been developed over many thousands of over 6,000 years, probably closer to 7, and how they their languages are still intact and their knowledge has been passed on. And so I look to traditional Chinese medicine first for a lot of information in a lot of the books that I read. But yeah, a lot of stuff is not understood yet. There's a lot of botany going on in anthropology, or there was, I should say, that's sort of like dying off. Like there's not a lot of people in the field anymore trying to find medicinal plants. There's a couple of guys that are still doing it who are like superheroes in my mind, who are out there in the jungles, getting bitten by snakes and spiders and trying to find like certain types of plants so they can find the next super, antibiotic or whatever to combat, the crisis that we're having right now with antibiotics. There's like one person I know of doing that in the whole world. And they're out in the middle of the Amazon or in Africa or wherever, and they're just looking for like these species of trees that we don't even know exist yet.
Right.
Mm-hmm. However, you might come across like a pygmy tribe, and their chief might be like, well, my son's going to take you out and show you the tree that cures that.
Yeah. His accent might have been a little different than that.
But cancer? Oh, we've been curing that for 2,000 years with this plant. It's right over there. You know? And or whatever, or the root from that thing.
But then some cocky Americans like, yeah, but can you check your Final Four bracket on your cell phone, bro?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I could see like a New Yorker comic with like a dude on his cell phone standing next to the pygmy, chief.
Yeah. Telling him to shut up as he's telling you the cure for
shut
cancer.
Up, I'm going to look it up on Google. I don't want to hear it from you.
Yeah. He's telling you to
shut up, little guy.
This right here is the cure for cancer, and he's like shushing him away, being like, wait, hold on, the final score is just about to happen.
Yeah. Can you believe a 1 seed lost in the first round?
Seriously.
All right, let's kind of bring it close to the end. I mean, David, you are a fascinating person. I've spoken with you many times, so I mean, I get my David McConnell fill a lot more than most people do. But if you can, you got to for immediately you go down to the property where Standard Foods is, which is now the Infinity 100 Farm in the back, so that you can actually see you doing your work, doing your craft. But I was going to say, well, let's tie it to the end. We have gifts for you, and I also figured that since we
oh my goodness,
since we just had St. Patty's Day, Matt, you and I don't even know the last time that Matt and I have actually indulged on a St. Patty's.
You guys are hilarious.
Well, Matt didn't even know I was going to do this, but this is just my excuse for us to have a midday drink.
Wow, what you got there?
So, well, for one, I'm pouring us a little Jameson.
Wow. This is awesome.
Cask Mates IPA edition. These are.
What's this?
This is whiskey.
What? Beautiful.
This has nothing to do with sponsorship or anything. But what David is saying, thank you, or beautiful, is our little gift bags, right? And so it's become a tradition now in 2018 that any of our guests that are on the show receive really cool gifts inspired from North Carolina. Yeah.
Thank you.
North Carolina producers.
Lovely.
Yeah, so that in your hand is the Social House Vodka, which is based right in Kinston, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And you can follow them at your Social House to create your own Social House moment.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You have
Thank you.
glassware from Bauscher. These are white IPA beer glasses. They're
Oh
pretty
my
cool.
gosh,
And
beautiful.
Bauscher is a
guys.
German company, but their offices are located here locally in Raleigh, and they're good
Wow.
friends of the show. Those glasses are sick.
Oh my gosh, they are. Those are gorgeous. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then, of course, you know Annabelle Commissar really well with Michael's English Muffins because
Yeah.
she sells them
Those
at
are
the
amazing.
market. But there's a little pack of muffins in there for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then you also have that little fancy can in there, which is organic and all natural, gluten-free, vegan. Brought to a friend of the show from Jordan Salcito. That's the Ramona, the cooler wine cooler.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's delicious. Little ruby red or Sicilian red grapefruit wine cooler.
Neat.
And then a new guy, new to the gift bag,
when
Mr.
you-
Ben Shaw.
Yeah.
So after you consume the Social House and the Ramona, or I should say, before you consume it, and talking about holistics and all that, this is just basically a vitamin pack called Happy Hour Vitamins. It's a specially formulated multivitamin for people that drink alcohol, so you can kill your hangover before it even starts.
It works.
Oh my gosh, it says helps avoid hangovers. Unbelievable. Is
Yeah,
it
so
true?
you like take a couple of them before you drink, or you can take some as you're drinking, depending on how much you actually consume.
Oh, look at all the herbs in there. Wow.
But he's a local. He's right on the coast of Wilmington, so big ups to Ben Shaw. Check him out
Awesome.
at
Thank you.
happyhourvitamins.com.
And then when you wake up and you feel all bright and cheery before you go out to the farm, you grab some of your Larry's beans from 42nd and Lawrence.
Oh, beautiful.
And Larry's Coffee has
Wow.
provided beans for your coffee that are specifically flavored for your profile.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're just like totally flush with cool products. And then, of course, you got the swag NCF&B podcast hat.
I love the hat. That looks great.
There's a shirt in there as well.
and I needed a new cap. So that's
Yeah.
Perfect.
Keep it out there. Keep keep yourself out of the sun.
beautiful. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
And what do you say?
This is Christmas.
What's
Slant?
the
Slant?
Slante
Slante
or
Slant mahat?
whatever? What do the Irish say when you drink? I don't
Slante
know. I'm
mahat.
going to say cheers.
Cheers.
I'm going to say l'chaim.
Wow. Yummy.
That was good.
That was tasty.
That
That's this. And,
that was one of Elliot's favorites, actually.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Full circle. I just want to know.
Really tasty.
Bringing it back to the very beginning, talking about music. Are you playing at all now? And are you doing any music, just even for yourself?
Well, I'm starting to think about doing music again.
Nice.
Like writing my own. I want it to come to me first. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to force it. Just like with art, you know. And so I'm starting to actually get like songs in my head now.
I have a
And,
concept for you.
Yeah.
Play music with like mediocre to bad musicians to see like what mediocrity sounds like in an awesome artistic sense. And I'll be right there with you, bro.
That's just Max's shameless way of trying to tell you that he wants to play with you.
Well, we've been talking about that.
Yeah.
We have discussed that. We need to do that. So yeah, I work with the studio that I work out of is called Thread Audio, and it's off of Wade and Brooks, and it's a studio that I designed. And my partner who owns the building is Michael Graziano, and he is somebody I met through the art world actually. He's also from LA, but he and I developed this recording studio and over several years, and it is like my dream studio basically. Like we just tuned it exactly to what we were looking for like a drum room and.
What's your console? What's your main console?
Well, so
you probably have multiple.
Well, now we're not using analog. Now we are actually on the Pro Tools thing now. So,
Yeah.
What I do, the way I designed it was to use vintage outboard gear as a console, essentially for the input stages, and then we monitor through the Pro Tools system on the output.
That's the most logistical way to make music, I would say. Like that's using technology, but that's also using your brain, because an analog tape machine is a bitch to do editing on. But if you've already got
I used to do that, and I'll tell you, it would take 3 hours just to like shift a snare drum over. You know, it was such a pain.
That sucks.
With a razor blade, you're sitting there cutting tape. But I've been there, and you know, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But
recording everything kind of in an analog sense and then editing them in digital makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, the way it comes in is through like vintage Neve and API and even EMI preamps.
These are all sexy letters to put it together.
You know, we've even got like old RCA stuff, you know, that like Elvis sang through, you know, just really old tube warm sounding gear. And so when it comes into the machine, into Pro Tools, it sounds like tape. You know, it sounds fat. You know, it's just super warm, and the bottom end is incredible. So I get a lot of pleasure recording other bands and artists, and so I'm still a record producer. You know, I take on like 3 or 4 album projects a year, and you know, it's just amazing to work with these musicians in this space, this studio space that I was able to set up to my liking.
Yeah.
And you know, I've worked at all the big studios in LA and stuff, and there's some great studios, but each one couldn't quite fulfill all my needs. So I was able to build this one with Michael, the studio, to fit, you know, my list of needs. So it's pretty awesome. And I'm going to go back in there soon and start working on my own project.
I'd love to just be a fly on the wall and even just get some pictures and snaps so we can have them on the show.
You're going to have to do at least one guitar solo.
Well,
oh, hell yeah.
You don't have to ask Max twice. I was going to say, and I've been trying to get somebody for months to do this. Can you play left-handed at all or upside down?
Oh,
yeah.
Because all of my instruments...
Would you play us out with the banjo?
Oh, my God.
Sure, why not?
Wait. Yeah, banjo?
Yeah.
Wait, how about this? Pick an instrument, David McConnell.
Okay, better.
Pick an instrument. You want to do a piano, guitars, bass?
I think the banjo is the way to go, honestly.
All right, dude.
He's a farmer.
I don't know how to play it, so that's why I want to try.
You'll figure it out. Hey, and before you play us out, can you just tell us? So, just to clarify, if I want some comfrey or some lemon balm or some mullion, we'll get to the pronunciation. Can I actually go to Infinity 100 and purchase it? And where would that be?
Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you for like talking about that all of a sudden. So, so people, please join my CSA, which is starting in a few weeks. I will have fresh produce for like 20-something weeks this season. I can take about 10 more members for my CSA. But you know, you'll get your regular produce, but also the cool thing about my CSA is that I'm throwing in like esoteric stuff like herbs too.
Yeah, some of the things we've
stuff
just
you
spoken
can't
about.
get. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
really cool.
and also some value added stuff like, you know, like herbal remedies, like, you know, skin tonics, and you know, I'm gonna, you know, I throw in extra stuff into my CSA basket.
Well, there are only 9 spots left because I'm going to be one of those.
Well, thank you.
What does it cost for the CSA?
So it's $35 a week, and it's
never mind. No, I'm out.
I'm
just kidding.
It's broken into different seasons. So you can either do the full year, which is 20-something weeks, or you could just do like, hey, I want to do like the 6-week spring version, or the, you know, the 10-week summer stretch, or you know, there are different ways to get involved, or you could do a half share.
Okay.
So, you know, a full share is for like a family of 5, you know, so like, you know, I have single people who have joined the CSA who just do a half share, and that works for them.
So that like Max lives, you know, somewhat in the North Raleigh area, so that's not a problem. I mean, what's your radius?
Well, you got to go pick it up.
Well, yeah.
Oh, you have to go pick it up.
They will pick it up from the Standard Foods, you know, location. So, so behind Standard, I will have a table out there, and actually, I might have, you know, like they might do drinks or something on pickup days. You know, you know, have something outside for folks to enjoy. You know, we're kind of toying with different ideas, but yeah. So,
to get that, you go to infinity100.com?
Well, the website is actually under construction right now, and yes, infinity100 just .com, and
is there any way to contact you now for anyone that's listening to the show and wants to get some instant satisfaction of building it up?
So yeah, so if anybody wants to join the CSA, and also restaurants and chefs who listen to your show should know that we want to pick up more restaurants. So you know, the farm right now is generating more produce than Standard Foods can use, and so and that's why I've been working with like Royale and Stanbury as well, and really, I can pick up like probably 3 or 4 more restaurants that I can be providing local.
Nice.
So
farm to table, produce for.
So how do they contact you if they want to do that?
So,
just come see you at Standard Foods?
If somebody wants to contact me, they can either come to Standard Foods or they can email me, and my email is soundfiasco. soundfiasco@gmail.com.
That's right. Soundfiasco@gmail.com.
And then the website will be up hopefully in about 2 or 3 weeks.
And follow David McConnell on Instagram because he's got some cool shit on there at times. He's at Objects Matter.
Yes, definitely follow me because I post some weird stuff.
Yeah. All right. Banjo it out. What we say
There we go.
Let's see.
Playing left-handed banjo.
That's never played banjo before.
I've never played banjo. Well, actually, I take that back. I did play banjo once, but I detuned it like I'm going to do now.
Your banjo tuning's going to be all fucked up, Max.
Great. Now I can't go play my bluegrass gig later today. There it is.
Kind of. That sounds like a horror show. Well, maybe next time don't have me play the banjo.
He did give you the choice, to
I'm
be fair.
gonna stick with my day job.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. The recording studio is a day job, I guess. Uh-oh.
Well, Matt, what else you got?
Dave, I don't know where you find time to do all this. You must have invented a time machine to give you more hours in the day, but your story is inspirational. Nice.
Yeah,
I like that.
I like banjo as a drum.
Oh, yeah.
That does sound good.
I'm
Play
sorry,
us out. No. Play us out
It's
on
like
that.
a timbales over there.
Email Dave at soundfiasco@gmail.com if you want to get a part of the CSA or get some of these delicious herbal remedies. And otherwise, everybody go to Infinity 100 Farms and you will eat and drink very merrily.
Guests of the NCF&B podcast receive a swag bag including gifts from these rockstar North Carolina producers: Larry's Beans and 42 in Lawrence, Social House Vodka, Ramona Wine Coolers, and Michael's English Muffins.
And we just added happy hour vitamins.
Thanks for listening to the NCF&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.